everybody. Welcome to the State of the Industry panel. We are so glad you're here. Whether you're joining us in person at the Orange County Convention Center or online, we're excited that you're with us. I'm Carrie Farinack, president and co-founder of CNTV, and I want to introduce these leaders of the industry to you. Let me introduce our panelists. We have Amy Calvert with the Events Industry Council. Give a wave, Amy. We're also joined by Sheriff Karamat from PCMA. Hi, Sheriff. Brad Main is joining us from IAVM, Venue Managers. Excellent. We have Larry Arnaday from ESCA. Larry, how you doing? Carl Eli is joining us from ASAE. Kathy Breeden with the Center for Exhibition Industry Research, and David O'Drain with CISO. How you doing, David? Nice to see you guys. First of all, who would have thought, right? I know you all have been in this industry for a long time. You've lived through 9/11, you've lived through the Great Recession, and yet no one saw this coming. No one saw this coming. There are so many things we could tackle because this is such new territory. But today we want to focus on recovery and advocacy. So I'm going to ask each of you a range of questions, and we'll have a discussion, and hopefully we will be able to tackle the issue of how to get business events back. So let's start with Kathy. Kathy, tell us what the SEER research really shows about when trade shows and events will be back online.
Yeah, thank you very much, Carrie, and thanks for having me here. SEER just held a webinar this week where we had our economist, Dr. Alan Shaw, give us support for not only the exhibition industry, but the economy overall. And as of right now, and it is only a forecast for B2B exhibitions to be to return in fully by 2022, begin growth again in fourth quarter of 2021. Again, this is just a forecast based on what we know at this time. Any good economist knows that he never promises anything. But I do think it's important for us to realize that we have a health crisis right now. It's not a credit crisis. You know, our stock market's performing well. The underlying fundamentals of the economy have been going well. So it's very different what's occurring right now. We are very, very encouraged to see our colleagues in South Korea and Taiwan and China start holding exhibitions again, and they're doing it very successfully. So it does give us hope here. We're looking, we're looking overseas at our colleagues over there on how it's being done and how it's being done safely.
It is nice to see some shows opening up around the world. So there is some sparkle of hope there. I know here in the United States, the focus is definitely on safety and specifically for the venues, right? So we want to talk a little bit about the GBAC certification. Brad, I know your members are the venues. So tell us a little bit about this new accreditation and how important it is.
Thank you, Carrie, and again, thank you for having me on this panel with all these great individuals. GBAC Star certification is actually a product from ISSA, the Sanitation Supply Association. Certifications are run by a Global Biorisk Advisory Council, which are science-based on biohazard sanitation. And the GBAC Star accreditation requires sanitization at the safest level. It focuses on 3 areas: prepare, respond, and recover. The council is made up of scientists, and this product is used in other industries, including hospitals, testing labs, excuse me, and healthcare facilities. The accreditation handles training and assesses protocols that sanitizes infectious diseases, and GBAC Star provides confidence, trust, and what we like about it is a third-party assessment of the work that everybody is doing. GBAC Star provides confidence and trust in a big way, and this was launched very recently. We're excited that we have approximately 40 venues that have either achieved accreditation or are in the process of doing it, and we also have 5 destinations who are in the process of getting accredited, with the destination marketing organizations asking all of their hospitality entities to be involved in it.
Well, and I know the Orange County, sorry to interrupt you, Brad. I know the Orange County Convention Center where this event is being held has the accreditation as well, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And in fact, just to name a few that we know have achieved already, Georgia World Congress Center,
Mhm.
Overland Park Convention Center, San Diego Convention Center, Los Angeles Convention Center, Jacob Javits Center, and then the 5 destinations. This is also being used by hotels and other parts of the hospitality industry.
It's super important, I know, and something that so many folks are looking for when they go to a venue. Larry, let's talk a little bit also about safety. I know ESCA published the health and safety guidelines, not only for attendees, but also for contractors. And one of the things I found the most interesting about that was the concept of work teams. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we started off with the our 2 chairs of the Health and Safety Committee who were, and I really need to mention their names because they've done so much great work. It's Mike Goodwin from Shepherd Expedition Services and Sheila LeMaster from GES, and they did a wonderful job of creating an outline that we could turn over to a committee of 30-something people, including all of the trades that were involved, because they're all members of ESCA, and they all work together to, put this document, which is, I want to say it's 27, 30 pages long, that has been distributed to the industry, to all of our membership, but to the industry as a whole, and several different press releases that went out. And it goes step by step, on how to comprise work teams safely, the procedures that they should use when performing the tasks that they do. And it's been very, very well received by the industry. And I know that there was a couple of events that took place here in Dallas, I believe at the Market Center, maybe sometime within the last month. And Sheila LeMaster, one of the co-chairs of the committee, was there because she was involved with the account, and she was very pleased to note that all of the procedures that we have recommended were followed by all of the workers. So
That's
far,
great.
so good.
That's great. Thank you, Larry. We appreciate that. And I know EIC is also focused on resilience and recovery, right, Amy?
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. Thanks for having me today and for your support. So the Events Industry Council, as everybody knows, is a global federation of over 30 organizations. And, the call to action has been, we've heard it loud and clear from the industry, is that it's so important that we really work in a unified manner to think about recovery and resilience and what the future holds for us. And that call to action really caused us to take a step back and reflect on, how we were going to do just that. So we've reconvened the Apex Commission and a COVID Business Recovery Task Force. And the task force is really focused on 2 pathways. One is very short term in terms of organizing, aggregating, and curating accepted practices and protocols in some key areas. And then longer term, looking at what are the adaptations that we need, what are the innovations, and really how do we support our workforce. So we're getting ready to release our first deliverable, and that will be early next week. And really what we're focused on there is helping people better understand, principles around a code of conduct. I think we all have to better understand in our individual roles as well as our organization's roles in assessing and mitigating risk, and then looking at how we measure success in light of what we're faced in the short term. And so it's really been tremendous to see this group to come together and really show up in this way for the industry. And whether you you think about it in terms of principles of recovery, or you think about it in terms of the values that this group came together to establish, their priorities were really trust, community, innovation. And I think those principles are really important. They speak to the values that we represent as an industry overall. So I think health and safety and the living work streams and the information that we're going to put forth as a working group will adapt and change over time as we have access to better information and as science continues to evolve. But yeah, I think it's really important that we have this and continue to commit to this global collaboration in this way.
Sure. Well, I appreciate that very much, Amy. And I know that as we look to the future, business events are going to look very different, right?
Yeah.
Let's turn to PCMA and Sheriff. Sheriff, what are you all thinking in terms of the future of event design?
Thank you, Carrie, and good day, everyone. There's a couple of things, and since we're in Orlando, I'm going to use the Orlando Magic as an analogy in a moment. However, let me first start and say that the future of events will look at four things, and those four things are community, content, commerce, and experience. And all four has to come together in order to make an event truly meaningful and engaging for participants. The second thing is I wanted to talk about the sporting industry and where the sporting industry has been. And so think about an event at the Orlando Convention Center, Orange County Convention Center, and think of sports and think of the Magic. Assuming that you didn't have television, you didn't have live streaming, and you just had the game. You would have had players, you would have had coaches, you would have had fans, you would have had hot dog vendors and beer sellers and so forth. That's all you would have had, right? Now think of an event as that now has a television contract. They require a production agency. They require TV broadcasters. They require color commentators, instant replay, and so forth. So an event truly is going to become omni-channel. And by omni-channel, it is not just two-dimensional, it's every dimension. And so looking at how you can broaden that audience. So if the Magic was looking at just the game day and without any television, that would all be their business model, and it would rely on one stream. Instead, they have to create a whole new business model that would involve television contracts and so forth. Events have to think about their business the same way and change the way they do business. So we see events, first of all, the four things that I said, commerce, content, and community coming together with experience in an omni-channel environment. And it doesn't happen the way it used to be, where it's 2.5 days and you deliver to people what they want. It's more about engaging people and having them engage in what they would like to.
That's a perfect example, and go Magic, since I'm here in Orlando. Speaking of associations, Carl, let's kind of switch to that, right? I mean, in addition to holding their annual meeting, associations have a real need to get content and education to their members year round, kind of like Sheriff was describing. Tell us how they're doing that now in this COVID world.
Yeah, absolutely, Carrie. Thank you. I think, like everyone, we feel like we're building the bridge and we're walking on it at the same time these days. But we're still striving for high quality events, great experiences. But we know nimbleness and agility, that's the priority right now. And we have to keep our eye on what's happening in our sector, and we need to respond to it. Now, depending on the type of association that you might represent, live events can be a major revenue driver. For some trade associations, 90% of their revenue can come from those face-to-face meetings. Our current situation is forcing us to really diversify our business, sunset some of those things that have not worked so well in the past, and create things that our members now see greater value in: new content delivery channels. And what I really think is that the virtual meetings that we all may be hosting today, they're going to build a better and a bigger and a broader meeting experience for the future. The silver lining in that is simply that more engagement today from more people in the virtual space that are members of associations are very likely to pump up attendance at face-to-face meetings in the future. So an example of that, ASAE had to cancel one of our events back in the spring. Typically 700 to 800 individuals come to that face-to-face event. We moved it into virtual. Yes, we moved it to complimentary registration, and that was a big factor. But we ended up with 3,000 people registered. So many more people engaged with the association, many more people having a great experience and being willing to come to that face-to-face meeting in the future.
I totally agree. When we did Exhibitions Day this year virtually, instead of having about 150 people on site in Capitol Hill, we had, I think, more than 650 people attend. So while we want to be on Capitol Hill in person, that virtual component gives us even more of a voice, right? I
Right.
think that's
Absolutely.
I think that's true. And I think that virtual component is probably here to stay. But first we need to get back to meetings face to face. And Kathy, I know you and I have talked a little bit about what the SEER research shows in terms of what the biggest obstacles are that we have to overcome to get back. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, certainly one of the things that I do is I look at a lot of different consumer sentiment surveys, both within our industry, the events industry, as well as just general consumer sentiment. And if you look at those consumer sentiment surveys, one of the biggest obstacles is, certainly feeling like you are safe on an airplane. And I think the airline industry is doing a good job of, putting information out on how that is the case. But we still have a lot of corporations and companies that are, they have travel bans in place. There's no plans as of right now of lifting those. That combined with budget cuts that we've all had to go through, I think is really going to impact attendance of both the attendees and the exhibitors in the coming 12 months. But, one of the things you talked about virtual, and one of the things I am seeing in all of the consumer sentiment surveys is there is a pent-up demand to return to live events. Exhibitors have told us that they've lost leads and sales opportunities, not had the ability to create the brand awareness that they've accustomed to doing at live events, and a very difficult time in maintaining or building those types of relationships with their current customers and prospects. And perhaps most importantly, because as we all know, many new products are launched into the marketplace at a trade show. And one of the things that I don't think that virtual will ever be able to replace are those serendipitous moments that happen at live events where you might be sitting next to someone in an education session and strike up a conversation, and that could be your next big customer. And I don't think that that's something that is so easily replaceable with any type of virtual event.
I completely agree. We're doing virtual events right now at CNTV, but it would never replace the value of us exhibiting at Expo, for example. I mean, they're just very, very different things, right? I know one of the big things is making sure that our leaders, whether that's at the state level or the national level, really understand what's going on, which is all about advocacy. And David, I want to bring you in. I know CISO and you personally have really taken the lead on the Go Live Together initiative. Can you catch us up and tell us where Go Live Together is now?
Yes, thanks, Carrie. When things really got closed down in March, it became very clear very quickly that there was going to need to be a more concerted effort from a consensus of the industry to advocate on behalf of the whole industry that went together. Freeman took a great leap forward in starting the ball rolling with the Go Live Together initiatives. They came to us quite quickly at CISO to ask for us to come in as a lead underwriter to the efforts that would need to be enacted. And the CISO board and leadership very quickly agreed to do that with a significant investment. We then have been able to get all of the major stakeholders in the industry, including all of those that are on this panel today, to be involved with Go Live Together, many providing additional funding as well to the initiatives as we went forward. We've engaged one of the top lobbying firms in Washington, D.C. We've engaged the top agency in the industry to handle the communications and PR work. And we've taken some aggressive positions on a lot of the advocacy work that needs to be lobbied for on behalf of the industry. That includes issues like liability for us as organizers, as event organizers, as venues. The business liability issue right now is a key issue for all businesses, but especially for our industry. That, along with there's a lot of work going into lobbying for tax credits for attendees and exhibitors to encourage them as events start to come back in place, for them to have extra resources to support attending and participating in events as we go forward. Highlighting the difference between managed, organized business events and the mass gatherings that the general media tends to unfortunately lump everything under. There's an awful lot of difference between us, a big out festival somewhere and a convention or a trade show. We've been talking about density for many months now, and density is a key issue. It is quite easy for us as event organizers in a venue like the Orange County Convention Center to manage the flow of participants coming in and out of the venue, to know who they are, first of all, so that for tracking purposes, we know who's coming to our events. We can provide the safety and sanitation per Brad's program with IAVM and the GBAC STAR program. We can provide the right kind of density. We can manage the flow of people into the event. We can provide densities, frankly, that are no different than a shopping mall or a grocery store in terms of the number of people per square meter coming into our venues and our events. So those are all things that we're educating our legislative leaders, our political leaders, both on a city, state, and federal level as to the value of it. We're also supporting some of the legislation that's been proposed, such as the Clean Start Act, to provide tax credits for the costs of providing PPE, providing special cleaning and sanitation services at venues and events. And most importantly, for many of us, is the insurance component. Event cancellation, business interruption, insurance is something that we take for granted in many cases. And many of us have used the communicable disease riders and coverage that's included in that on the event side. And this year, frankly, it has saved many associations, businesses, and those of us organizing shows from the catastrophic devastation we've experienced with the wholesale cancellation of events. That coverage doesn't exist anymore. You cannot get communicable disease coverage for event cancellation or business interruption insurance right now going forward. And after 9/11, the same thing happened with terrorism and terrorism coverage. And the government produced what was called TRIA, T-R-I-A, as a government-backed insurance program to provide a backstop and underwriting by the government of that kind of coverage. And there is a very broad industry coalition across all businesses, not just our industry, for the government to help step up and backstop and underwrite a similar. There's even a bill called PRIA that's been proposed, but something like that is what the Go Live Together, CISO, and all of us are advocating for. We need this, or the risks to organize events, run venues, is going to be overwhelming for many of us. So those are some of the main issues that we're focused on.
Well, and I know advocacy really involves all of us, right? We've got to continue to stay active, to communicate with our leaders, whether that's at the state level or the national level. And I think that's so important.
And there is, in fact, there's a new initiative coming out. It may already have reached you by the time you see this recording on Friday, but Go Live is reaching out to the entire industry to collect the connections that we all have on a federal level, on a state level, on a local level, to be able to go out to people and say, okay, we have this act or this proposal that we're pushing forward. If you know people in this city, in this state, in this country, in Congress or the Senate, we need you to share this with them directly. And so that database of connections is being built very soon, and there'll be requests for submission of your own connections and to be connected to make sure you're aware of everything that's coming out, and to, as you say, advocate for those messages as we go forward.
I think it's so important. I was really energized. We did a webinar this week for Exhibitions Mean Business campaign, which is also advocacy, and we had hundreds of people, and they were new people. So I think the advocacy piece of it, suddenly we're all learning that we have to be a part of this, and we have to communicate this message. I know IAVM has been a part of these advocacy efforts and also supports Go Live Together. Brad, tell us a little bit about your efforts in terms of looking for new legislation. Oh, I think you're on mute, Brad. There you go. Only once so far, so that's good.
Sorry about that. First, I want to say how impressed I am. One of the silver linings that I've seen with the pandemic is the whole industry coming together. It's amazing of all the different coalitions that are out there, all speaking for the most part with one voice. Of course, some have different issues that they deal with. You know, you look at the Go Live Together. EIC and all the work that they're putting together, U.S. Travel. We've put together a live events and entertainment coalition that is pretty diverse. It includes companies, entities that are presenting events in our stadiums, arenas, and obviously CISO and IAEE are a part of that as well. But as it relates specifically to IVM members, to date, and I'm sure there are other organizations and their memberships that are like this, to date, 90% of our venue managers have not been included and are not eligible for any of the legislation. And the challenge that we're having is, as we present and say that we need relief, protection, and stimulus, is, well, you're a government entity. We're on the federal level, we're giving the states monies, which should be trickling down to you. And what the legislators don't understand is that our venues operate on enterprise operation funds, which means they generate the vast majority of their revenues come from hosting events, and with our doors closed, we don't have any money. So layoffs and furloughs and all different types of programming to cut the expenses are happening, and the challenge is going to be the need for new technologies, new protocols, training of our staff to what those new products and protocols are going to be. We're going after that stimulus dollar. The other thing we're doing is we do have two different COVID-19 working groups. One of them is for the whole industry. Again, the meetings industry has been really involved in that, and a big thank you to my colleagues on the call here. But we've also put together specific protocols for our venues, and we're using those protocols. As we all know, there are hotspots. We also know that the phases of opening are happening on the local level through those authorities, and so these protocols have already been going to those advisory groups. Our venue managers are meeting with the mayors and council members, governors, and saying, we are prepared and ready to be safe. But we need your help and your assistance from a finance standpoint. So both happening on the federal level as well as the local and state level.
A lot happening. Well, and I know ASAE has had a recent push specifically to get some COVID relief funds for associations, right? Carl, tell us about that effort. Oh, you got to unmute.
Well,
Two strikes,
two
Carl.
of us, right?
3 strikes, you're out. No, I'm just kidding.
Congress is set to return to Washington next week to start to hammer out a deal on the next COVID-19 relief package before they go on August recess. The House and Senate leaders, well, they're reportedly still pretty far apart, but they have different priorities, of course. So this is for the 5th and probably the final COVID stimulus measure. Senate Republicans are expected to introduce roughly about a $1 trillion bill next week, and that's much smaller in scope than the $3 trillion HEROES Act that Pelosi ushered in just a couple months ago. So there's your differential, just a small $2 trillion delta there between the two.
A little tiny.
Yeah.
Wow.
So ASAE and numerous other organizations, associations, DMOs are still actively urging congressional offices to support specific relief for the Paycheck Protection Program for associations inclusive of DMOs. You probably recall all Section 501c organizations, with the exception of 501c3 entities, were left out of the bill that was passed, the CARES Act, back in March. So where are we? What can we do? ASAE has a grassroots portal set up for the letter writing campaign, and very easy to get to. The ASAE website. Go to advocacy, and that will put you right in the letter, and you can take your action there. We all need to do this, all of us,
Yeah.
associations, DMOs.
I agree. I think we're all learning that we are the ones who can take the action. We are the ones who can write our representatives. We are the ones who can tweet and share on social and make sure that we get the word out. And I know the impact has been just tremendous on the workforce, right, for employees. And Larry, when we talk about contractors and workers who actually put these trade shows on, it's kind of interesting that the unions have all come together, right? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we have led a pretty large effort throughout our entire membership, and with the support of all of the trades that are members, because you know, the carpenters, the teamsters, the electricians, the riggers, stagehands, they're all members of ESCA, and they have all worked with us very closely, particularly throughout the Labor and Management Committee that meets on a fairly regular basis. And they have been great to work with, and you know, it's not ending. You know, it's not something that we're going to stop. You know, as soon as we see a break in COVID, it's going to continue on, and I think it will be, you know, great for the entire industry that, you know, the relationships and the working groups that have been put together will continue on in the same format.
That's a really good point. I know EIC also has measures in place to really kind of support the workforce specifically. Amy,
Yeah,
can I ask you?
one of the
Go ahead,
things,
Larry.
yeah, one of the things that we've done, Carrie, is that we are blasting out information from our HR partner, EmployCo, on a regular basis. We probably send 2 or 3 blasts out to our membership every week, and each one of those blasts contains anywhere from 6 to 8 to 10, 12 different articles and different resources for the membership to look at as new information is discovered and made available, you know, to us about COVID and you know, what can be done to help fight it, and you know, proper safety, you know, in working conditions and whatnot. So we continue to roll that out on a regular basis, and we've done, I want to say, 4 or 5 full hour-long webinars for our entire membership.
And I think it's so important to get that information out there so everybody knows what's available, right? Amy, turning to EIC, tell us a little bit about the measures in place to really protect the workforce from that point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Carrie, you hit the nail on the head that we all have a collective responsibility to be advocates as we go through space and time. And I think there are some learnings that we've all had, you know, as it relates to telling our best story as a global industry. And certainly, you know, I think, you know, EIC, on behalf of its members, commissions an economic significance study every 2 years. The last global study, you know, suggests that our industry represents over 26 million professionals globally. So, you know, that's something that we can't lose sight of. And I think the health and safety piece as we bring people back is super, super important, because it speaks to the well-being of the individuals. And you know, in the hospitality profession, we want to ensure everybody feels comfortable going back to work to ensure the safe experience that they, you know, participate in hosting. And I think we know the frontline workers especially are the most vulnerable. So all the measures in place that these respective organizations on this call today and my other members and all of the private sector partners are doing to support the workforce, I think has been tremendous. But I really think it starts with sharing best practices and protocols. And that's one of the pieces of the puzzle as it relates to the Apex work. The other piece that the group is really looking at, and it speaks a bit to the adaptations and the transformations that are going to be, you know, upon us as a result of what we're facing, is, you know, how do we best prepare the workforce for what's next? So the Apex COVID Task Force is really looking at, you know, what are the inspirations and the information that we can serve up to the industry in areas that have to do with professional engagement and reskilling and thinking about new opportunities, and to be enthusiastic about that. And then to also look at, you know, the younger folks entering this workforce at a time of unprecedented disruption. You know, what can we do in working with the academic institutions globally? What can we all do through our various certifications to ensure that that's something we're thinking about and applying some collaborative effort around?
Mm-hmm. And you know, it's definitely going to look different, not only for the frontline workers that you described, but also for those business event strategists, for those show organizers, right? Sheriff, tell us a little bit about PCMA's Recovery Discovery. I know that you guys are putting in place.
Sure. Thank you, Carrie. Could I go back for a bit? And I want to focus on a mindset shift.
Sure.
You know, in 2010, PCMA acquired a company called the Virtual Edge Institute. And we quickly renamed it the Digital Events Institute. And the reason being is that there's this connotation that virtual is not real. And what we are doing here right now is very, very real. And we are conducting business. And so this mindset that we're going to go back to this tangible world and we will forget about this online world is sort of an assumption that I don't comport with. It doesn't work for me. And so we renamed it the Digital Events Institute. And I'll tell you, the year after we left Las Vegas and went to San Diego, our attendance increased by 10%. And it increased by 10%. 90% of those people said the reason why it increased was because they saw us online and they want to engage on a face-to-face format. And so I'm here to tell everyone that digital will drive face-to-face growth. In corporate America in 2008 on the economic recession, I did a survey back then, and almost all of corporate America, almost wholesalely, they canceled their meeting. Association attendance were down, and they canceled their meeting, and they were all full on digital. Well, guess what? They came back with face-to-face stronger than ever and more than ever. So I want us to keep that in the back of our mind. As we move forward, though, and we talk about recovery discovery, we've got a few things happening here with us right now. We've got a healthcare crisis that we have to put a lid on. We have an economic crisis that is upon us. We have in the UK and in the EU, Brexit will happen at the end of this year. We have a US election that's happening. And then we have policies that are restricting movement of people, such as travel policies around healthcare or otherwise. So you've got a convergence of things that is being exacerbated by COVID. So on the recovery discovery journey is to bring people the latest insights. Amy talked about upskilling, new business models and so forth that needs to happen. But what we are seeing is that sectors and geography plays a big difference in this recovery. And so as we look at that, we're looking at how the sectors, and Kathy talked about how Asia is recovering. They're a different part of the journey. So we've got to think of that, what is gonna make sense. And what we are seeing is that recovery is starting from within cities, not from outside of your cities. Very, very different. So in Orlando, things are going to start very domestically before they go outward and then take on a national and international flair. And so we have that, one. Two is that safety is definitely a big factor in this. Third is that we as an industry needs to change our mindset. Our mindset has to be that we are going to engage people the way they would like to be engaged. No longer are we going to continue to serve up what we think we had served up in the past and expect it to work. Because COVID has done one thing, and that is that it has allowed all of us to reflect, including our participants. And what I've found along the recovery discovery journey is there is a big disconnect between event organizers and event participants. And we've got to reconcile those two to understand how participants find value in what we do. What I've found is that we have been so married to the channel that we have forgotten why we do events, and we are not concerned about the outcomes. So our organizations must shift the outcome and what is going to bring value to that participant.
You know, Sheriff, that reminds me actually of some past SEER research I know from, I think as far back as maybe 2014. Kathy, talk to us a little bit about that. I remember that there were some things that exhibitors wanted to see that maybe the change is good, to Sheriff's point. Kathy.
Yeah, you know, it's one of the great things I like about research is that it helps provide perspective. And unfortunately, you know, when people review research, they don't necessarily pay attention as closely as they should be on what it is telling us. I do agree with Sheriff that, you know, certainly this pandemic, this crisis, this confluence of crises is really helping everybody to reflect and adapt and hopefully be able to keep their business alive in the future. And even back in 2014, we do a lot of research of corporate marketers, exhibitors, and looking at, what it is that they're thinking in terms of where they're going to spend their marketing dollars. And even back in 2014, and going back to what Sheriff was also talking about omni-channel marketing, exhibitors are spreading out their marketing dollars. Always trade shows have been at the very top and have always been highly valued, either as the top or second to the top method for marketing their business. But in 2014, way back then, the exhibitors were telling us that they wanted more year-round engagement, not just, a couple weeks before the show and after the show and during the show, but they want to be able to connect with their buyers year-round. And they also showed just recently in 2017 that exhibitors wanted smaller, more regionalized events. They didn't want the standard pipe and drape that has been historically the model that the US follows. And so I think it's very important at this point that, all of the event organizers are paying attention to listening to their customers and really delivering what it is that their customers want rather than the standard business model that we have been following. So this crisis has really, I think, been able to elevate the need for change, and we just can't fear this change. We've got to embrace it, and if not, then your business isn't going to succeed in the future.
I heard someone recently describe a virtual event as a remote experience instead of a virtual event, because you're still having the experience, right? And that's still so important. As we talk about what these events and trade shows might look like in the future, David, I'd be curious of your thoughts on that through CISO and being a show organizer yourself.
I wanted to unmute first. It's interesting. I think that Sheriff's point is well taken, that there is a digital component that is becoming a bigger part of a lot of what we're doing. And it reminds me a little bit of, going back 20 years to when we really started seeing the internet change how we were running events very much at that point, where, we had done everything by print. Everything was mass mailed. It was just general brochures. There was no real customization of messaging. It was a very solid, static message that we went out with. And as the internet provided a whole new set of tools to us, we changed how we marketed events very much at that point. The old, 48-page brochure for a conference or a convention is pretty much gone, though not completely. And we started changing the messaging to actually reflect the needs or the desires of our audience, which are not the same. Out of every 100 people that come to a trade show, I guarantee you that 99 of them have different needs than the other one. And so we started being able to communicate specific needs. I think back to shows like SEMA that I used to run, where we would know that they were interested in performance parts. We would know they were interested in fancy wheels. And so it's very easy with that kind of knowledge to take a message that goes back and says, we know you were looking for wheels last year. Here's all the new wheel guys exhibiting this year. Well, that same logic is now coming to what we're seeing with as Sheriff says, digital events and digital content. And we're seeing the ability to drive a much more interaction, a much specific matchmaking, specific content, again, based on the needs of those individuals. What we are sure of is that face-to-face events still have primary value. One of the things we've seen, as we talked a little bit about, as we're coming out of this crisis on the other side of the world, we're seeing shows in Asia coming back just as strong as they were a year ago. Literally shows that I've had colleagues in China tell us about in parts of China coming back with even higher attendance than they had last year. So, and we know that in Europe, they're already planning for a fall start with many of the traditional shows that have been around for many years also plan to come back in the solid way. So we feel very strongly that face-to-face events will continue to have the kind of value that they've always had. But we are looking at just that evolution of being able to add components to broaden the base, to widen the audience, and to make it again more specific ROIs for everybody concerned.
I think that's exactly it, right? It's all about the return and what the attendee gets out of it with that year-round engagement that both Sheriff and Kathy talked about. Absolutely. All right, so we want to do some final thoughts. So we want to hear something from each of you, either that sort of solidified what you already knew about the industry, or maybe something new that you've learned based on COVID-19. Let's see. I'll take volunteers for starting, I guess. Anybody want to go first? No volunteers? All right, Carl's in. Carl, give us your final thoughts.
Sure. Quickie, though, it's meet your members where they are.
Very good. That should have a hashtag, I think, if it doesn't already. That's a good one. Amy, how about to you for a final thought?
I'm gonna unmute myself here. So I think for me, you know, Carrie, this is an opportunity for us to reflect and think about our relevance, and what that really is to me is an exercise in value creation, right? And I think we've spoken about that in a number of different ways here today. This is an opportunity for us as an industry that values things like trust, diversity and inclusion, and equity, to take a step back and use what we're going through right now to come out stronger, and an industry that looks for different ways to live its values and to be, you know, adaptive and more resilient, and to better tell our story. So, you know, for me, you know, this has forced upon us some conversations that we've really kind of neglected for a very long time. And I think, you know, it's time for us to ask ourselves and ask ourselves collectively as an industry some really generous questions about, you know, where we really see ourselves going to ensure a solid future.
Very good point. Yep. Brad, how about you? Final thought.
Well, I found that our industry is resilient. They're hopeful. They're focused. We didn't have the playbook for the pandemic. And I liked what Carl said earlier about building the bridge while you're walking over it. Mm-hmm. And so that resiliency and that focus to address what the issues are ahead of us are really important. And the fact that there's been so much collaboration within the industry, and we're seeing that with our members as well. We've been hosting a handful of webinars, and started those, I think, in the third week, maybe the fourth week of March. We've now done more than 12,000 hours of our members being online, wanting to know what they can do, and it's a collaborative, you know, effective way where everybody has the input. So we're listening to what our members need and want, and they're giving us the expertise to get through this.
Absolutely. Good point. Larry, how about you?
Well, what I see as much as anything is that, you know, for all the negative that we see out there, there's an awful lot of positive that I see. You know, the closeness that has come within the various different segments of these industries. I think we're all closer. I used to see Amy, what, twice a year, Amy, I believe. I see her twice a week now. And I think that's a good thing, because, you know, we are all developing much closer relationships, and I think we'll all communicate more closely as we move forward. I, you know, look at it as a learning experience. I can recall going through hurricanes in the middle of move in or move out of shows down in New Orleans at the old Rivergate, which those of you that are not old enough to remember, it is now Harrah's Casino. It used to be, you know, one of the top convention centers in the country, and, you know, trying to move shows in and out in the middle of hurricanes was a learning experience. But, you know, now they know, now we know, we know what to do. We know how to prepare for a hurricane. And I think we know how to prepare for the next pandemic that comes down the line. And it's been good because it's brought us all much more closely together.
I agree with you, Larry. Although as a Floridian, I just can't stand the thought of a Cat 5 hurricane right now. So let's try and push that off until 2021. Sheriff, how about you for a final thought?
Sure, but first let me challenge Larry. Larry, you don't realize I'm as old as you, but dark-skinned fools. So, hey, listen, I really feel this. First and foremost, COVID has been a just tremendous tragedy in all of our lives. There's no question about that. And there's great sadness and great grieving that's going on in our industry. And I want to make sure that we underline that point. But I also think that COVID has done one thing for us, and that is that it actually shone a light on the importance of the business events industry and the business events platform. And I think no greater of a light could have been shone on us and the impact that we have. And I say this, that business events is a meta industry of all industries. It touches every industry. So impact has been so profound. And if I may close with one thing, and that is that there is no better industry when we bring people together to solve complex problems. And I'm really proud of our industry and think that together, when we look at each other in the eye, we can solve anything that comes in front of us. Doesn't matter what it is. So I'm extremely optimistic. I think face-to-face is not going to be back. It's going to be back better and stronger and bigger, because tacit knowledge is never transferred unless it's in a face-to-face and deep immersion. So I'm very optimistic about our future.
I love it, Sheriff. Thank you so much. That optimism is contagious. Kathy, over to you for a final thought.
Yeah, thank you. Well, certainly, it is that the business events industry is resilient, and exhibitions and face-to-face has been proven time and time again. After each recession, after each crisis, it comes back. And, it just reinforces to me the impact that this industry has on so many lives. And, and all those people that are being impacted right now through loss of jobs and the transfer of knowledge that isn't being done right now because everybody is, still, in a lockdown mode pretty much. So I think that, just really the business events industry, I'm hoping that this time around that we will have learned our lesson and that we have all of our structures in place so that when the next crisis hits, that we will be prepared to respond to it rather than us trying to scramble to respond to it. And I really am very hopeful that after this crisis and how the industry has come together, that the next one that we'll be well prepared for it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Kathy. All right, David, final word.
Well, I agree with everything that the rest of the panel has said, and it is gratifying, at least with of all the devastation we're dealing with, at least the industry has coalesced around the message that business face-to-face events are of value to everybody. And the message we keep trying to take to the leaders out there from the political side is that it's not about the trade show or events industry per se as an industry. It's about the fact that we serve every industry. That there isn't an industry sector, from manufacturing to services to medical, you name it. There isn't an industry sector out there that face-to-face business events don't serve. And if you look at the stats, and I suggest you go to some of the stats that are on either SEER or GoLiveTogether.com, the vast majority, in most cases 80 to 90% of exhibitors and participants at many of these events are small businesses. And if you talk to them, the vast majority of them use these live events, these trade shows, these conferences, these business events, they use them to generate almost sometimes all of their revenue. So right now, the fact that events are closed down is affecting every industry and the vast majority of every business in those industries. And that's what we have to get through to people. It's not about just us being able to run shows again. The only reason we run shows is because we provide a purpose. We don't run shows because we want to run a show. It doesn't matter what we want. All that matters is what the industry wants, the industry sector we're serving with those events. And that's what we have to get through to the powers that be to enable us to run events, successful, valuable, safe events again.
I totally agree. And in fact, our business was formed and started back in 2007 because we exhibited at a trade show at Expo. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. And if I could add one thing too, when I joined this industry, one of the things I found right away was the passion. And so for me, a final thought is that we all need to take that passion and turn it into action, right? So whether that's accepting the change or learning something new or advocating and writing to our representatives, we've got to be taking action to bring business events back. So I would like to thank all of you so much for being with us. We really appreciate it. We wish we could have all been together here in Orlando in person. It will not be long till we can do that again. But in the meantime, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it. So we'll send it right back to the folks at Orange County Convention Center. And for now, I'm Carrie Farinack with CNTV. Thanks, you guys.